Okay, so I have a DGN file here that it's a blank container DGN file. It's got nothing in it except the references of my other design files in there. So I'm going to use this container file to create my named boundaries, and I'm going to create my plan sheets in it. I'm running that command right now. I'm going to go ahead and create the drawing model there, and it has created. And if we go and look at the drawing model, we see that it's pulling the settings from the design model, and you'll see that we have this option for it was added a few versions ago in settings. We have this option to settings from design model, and that works great, and we like that. If I go to the design model, I can change the settings in it. For example, I'm going to turn off the fill in this design model, and that is automatically reflected in my drawing model. But there is a kind of a complication here that is not totally intuitive, and that's what I want to describe here. And that is, if I go back to the default design model, if I right click and I use like a view control or something that kicks off a multi-model view, so I'm going to click that and show my 2D and plan view, you see my named view group comes up and I have multi-model view now. So what happens now is this multi-model view has taken control over what controls the display settings from design model for my drawing models. So to show that here, if I go back to default like I did before, if I turn the fill back on, then we will notice that the fill does not come on in the drawing model. And that's because once the multi-model view is created, it kind of takes over the control here. So if we turn our fill on in multi-model view, and let's say we turn off constructions here in this multi-model view, these lines up here at the top are construction lines. Let's turn those off. So now that we're doing that in multi-model view, and we go and we look at the drawing model, the constructions are off, the fill is back on. The complication here, just to be aware of, that if I were to go in here and manually create a new view group, that new view group that I create would now take over again. So it's kind of acting as whatever the last created named view group kind of takes control over what controls the display in our drawing models. So we're going to have recommendations in our so I'm going to have recommendations now based off of this for when creating sheets, and that is one is always use a container file to create sheets. It's just so much easier to have that one container file that controls those display settings instead of having to worry about how the settings are being controlled in the different design files that other designers might be in and changing. So use a container file when you're creating your sheets. Number two is keep that default design model in view 1. If we go back and look at our multi-model view, we always want our default model, and by default it's named default. I know some people might change the name of their default model, but whatever that default design model is, let's keep that in view 1. That's recommendation number 2. And then recommendation number 3 is in this container file that we're creating, do not create additional named view groups in it, because they will take over the control of the settings from the design file, and we'll get confused as to what is controlling it. So do not create any additional named view groups. If we keep it to where just the multi-model view controls it, that's easy to understand. If I want to change some settings, I can come here to multi-model view. I can turn on and off the attributes. Let's turn our fill off, and let's turn our constructions back on. And now when we go back to the model, we'll see constructions on and fill off, right? So as long as we don't create any additional, we don't confuse the matter by having additional named view groups here in my container file, and multi-model is gonna control. Multi-model actually gets regenerated a lot of times when we run commands, like if we right click in here and we use some of these view control commands, it actually regenerates multi-model. So if we had created a named view group and it took control of those display settings, the next time we recreate the multi-model view, it kind of takes back over. So we don't want to add that layer of confusion in there. We just want to, in this container file, don't create any other named view groups. Use multi-model view to control it, and get in the habit of going and clicking on multi-model view when you want to change those settings instead of going back directly to the default design model.